Hello, everyone. This is Christina Jang from ITDP, and I will be the host of your webinar today. Before I go ahead and introduce our speaker, Ricardo Giesen, there are just a few things to note for the webinar. Yes, this webinar will be recorded, and I'll share the recording and PowerPoint with you through a follow-up email, and also be available on our website. To interact with our host today, you can submit questions through the Q&A function, which is either at the bottom or the top of your Zoom screen. I please ask you to refrain from using the chat box because we'll actually be able to call all the questions only through the Q&A function. Please also feel free to enter questions throughout the presentation because it will not interrupt our PowerPoint. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our webinar today titled Technology to Improve BRT Reliability, Lessons and Challenges. Today, our speaker, who will also be presenting at MOBILIZE Fortaleza this June, Dr. Ricardo Giesen, will present experiences in developing analytical methods to avoid bus bunching in BRT systems. He will discuss main challenges in implementing this technology and also review pilot studies in Santiago, Chile and Lund, Sweden. Our presenter today, Dr. Ricardo Giesen, is the director of the BRT Center of Excellence, an associate professor and former director of the Department of Transport Engineering and Logistics at the Pontifical Catholic University in Chile. He specializes in operations of transport systems, public transit planning and operations, logistics and distribution optimization. He earned his PhD degree in civil and environmental engineering from the University of Maryland in 2007. Before I hand off the presentation to Ricardo, we will have Cesar from ITDP Mexico give a brief introduction and background on the importance of analyzing and improving bus reliability. Cesar, I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and you can feel free to share your PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Okay, so can you see my screen?
It looks clear on my end.
Okay, thank you all for attending to this webinar, and thank you, Christina. This is just a very brief introduction to why are we talking today about reliability. We have some previous works with the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative, in which we had some sessions on sustainable transportation and urban developments, and some site visits on MOBILIZE Dar es Salaam on Tanzania, which was last year. And so as part of this work on BRT operations, on last October, on the end of the last October, we had experience sharing workshop on operation and integration challenges on BRT systems in Latin America. This workshop was in Mexico City, and it was based on real cases presentations about solutions implemented or planned to face operations and integration challenges. It was today's workshop in which we had 12 cases presented from 11 cities, from 6 Latin American countries, and also 4 experts presentations from Cristina Albuquerque from WRI Brazil, Ana Odilia Gipaiva, a Brazilian consultant, Ulises Navarro from Modelistica Mexico, and also Ricardo Giesen, who will be presenting today. In this workshop, we had also in total 30 participants, including public and private BRT representatives, experts and partners, and also the team from ITDP Mexico and ITDP Brazil. As part of the selection for this webinar, for this workshop, sorry, we had an online survey about the main challenges for operation and for integration and access. And as a result of this, we had the lack of reliability and regularity as the second most relevant challenge for the representatives of the BRT systems that were on the process of on the selection process. So this is just after the fair evasion. That is a very different challenge, sorry. But this is what we see that is a very relevant challenge for a lot of BRT systems. So as part of this continuous work with Tommy, we are now preparing some infographics about reliability and about integration. So these both these materials will be available soon, and we are we are like categorizing different approaches to face lack of reliability based on interventions to infrastructure, to regulation, and to technology. So Ricardo will be talking about today about how to improve reliability based on technology. So thank you all, and I'll let you with Ricardo.
Great, thank you so much, Cesar. And once the infographic is ready, I'm also happy to share that with all the webinar attendees today. You can go ahead, stop sharing your screen. Oh, great.
Okay.
And then you can get started.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen or no? Okay. Yeah. Are you seeing the right one? Apparently not. So displays. Now you're seeing the right one. Is that correct?
No, for right now, I am just seeing you on the screen.
Oh.
I don't see your presentation
Shut
quite
down
yet.
my screen. Let me see. Where do I do it? Share desktop. Okay. Desktop 2. Now you're seeing my desktop or no?
Yes, we can see it now. Thank you.
Perfect. Now we're okay. So welcome everyone, and thank you very much to Cristina and Cesar for this kind introduction. And let me go ahead and talk about this, how these technologies can improve reliability, some lessons and challenges from the implementation that we have been doing here in Santiago and the pilot test in Lund, Sweden. Okay. So, but before doing that, I would like to mention what we do at the BRT Center of Excellence, and then go ahead and talk about reliability as a key component to satisfy transit users, then what technology we have available to improve the reliability, and maybe talk about priorities and bus assist, which is the commercial part of the research that we have done to implement in practice. And finally, to talk about experiences and some conclusions and recommendations. The Center of Excellence that I'm now leading, it's a center composed by 4 universities and 1 NGO that put the feet on the ground for our research. We are sharing the research part labs with the University of Sydney, the University of Pretoria, and MIT in Boston, and WRI, who has offices in many cities. So that's where we are. So what do we want in a transit service? And we want to be fast. We want to arrive on time. We want to, most people don't travel to to do tourism. And so most of us, when we travel, we want to arrive as soon as possible to our destination. So we want a fast transportation system. We would like to have low waiting times. And the way to do that is to increase the frequency of public transport services. We would like to have a lot of comfort. We don't want to be in a crowded bus. So we would like to increase the capacity of our services, and we would like it to be reliable. So all of the things that we have before, we need to have it on our daily experience, not only one time in a month. So to do that, we need to reduce the variability of the travel time and improve our experience. So how to do that? We need to increase the speed of the buses. We need to increase the fleet size or increase the buses to reduce the waiting times. And we need to increase the fleet size, the size of the vehicles, or increase the speed if we want more comfort. But for the last one, the critical point is increase the headway regularity. And that's not as easy said or done as said. So what would like to be the message today is that we need to provide a good level of service on public transport or BRT. We need to increase the speed and have regular headways. And what's the typical problem with buses? Let's imagine that these are buses, put it right there. It's like they are like amens, so they attract to each other. So whenever two buses are starting to come together, they will go right to each other. So the bunching is really a problem that occurs everywhere. It's not bad luck when you arrive to a particular bus stop and you wait a lot to enter to a crowded bus, and normally two buses are right behind the one that you board. We have a nice collection of pictures of bus bunching phenomena in different cities. This is the one that you will get if you look for bus bunching in Wikipedia. That's London, and you have two buses together. Probably these buses should run every 8 or 10 minutes, and they are all together, but probably afterward you will have more than half an hour without, or 20 minutes without a bus. This is Santiago, Chile. That's my local experience, but we had seen this in Singapore, in Sao Paulo, in Beijing, in Boston, Massachusetts, and wherever you go, you can get this type of pictures, and we have a big collection of this. So we would like to answer 3 questions. The first one is why bunching occurs. The second is what are the impacts of this phenomena, and is there a solution? And then I'm going to introduce the technological work that we have been implementing here in Santiago based on our research. So why bunching occurs? It has 2 main causes. The first one is travel time variability. Why travel time variability occurs? Because you might have poor dispatching, and that's something that we realized after we started working on that, because the phenomena was well described in the literature, and most of the description of the phenomena is based on the congestion. So when bus hits a patch of congestion along the road, that bus probably will arrive late to the next stop. And since it arrived later to the next stop, there will be more passengers than usual in that stop because more had accumulated over time, and that bus will have a longer stop at that stop, and therefore the buses will become delayed farther and farther along the route, while the bus that is behind probably will not catch as many passengers in that stop, so that bus is going to go faster. So the 2 buses will, at some point, will be together. And that's what we normally see in practice. And this could happen because of congestion, because of traffic light, because drivers are heterogeneous. Some drivers like to drive faster and some drivers like to drive slower. And since the dynamic of the systems helps buses to become closer to each other, not to be on a regular basis, that will increase the problem. And in practice, we also notice after working and seeing data is that the dispatching is very poor at terminals. So at the headers of the bus services, normally what you see is that buses are not dispatched on a regular basis. So there sometimes two buses are leave on a shorter headway, and some others leave farther apart from each other. So that will exacerbate the problem that we are seeing along the route. And the other problem that could happen is variability in stopping times at the different stops. So because we have random arrival of passengers, there might be the case that many passengers arrive to a particular stop, and then the bus get delayed at one stop. Once it's delayed at that stop, the next bus is coming on a shorter headway, so will probably carry less passengers. So that would be the second reason that it could happen. And when we see data, and this is data from trajectories of one bus services in Santiago, we see that the dispatching here at the beginning on the kilometer zero in the basis of the graph. Can you see my mouse there? You see that many of the dispatchings are not on a regular basis. So here we see 3 buses leave the terminal right together, then we don't see a bus in almost 10 minutes, and then 2 buses together. And when we go along the way, we'll see that these lines tend to go together. So here we will see 4 or 5 buses together, here 4 or 5 buses together, and in some places, 20 kilometers from the starting point of the bus on a bus stop, you might see at some times of the day at 8 a.m. that there's no bus passing by in more than 30 minutes, while these buses run almost every 4 minutes. What are the impacts of this? Well, we increase the waiting times because we normally will arrive to a longer headway rather than to a short bus, short headway. We will decrease the comfort and reliability of our experience. Some days we're going to wait a lot, some days we are not going to wait that much. And when we wait a lot, we normally will board a crowded bus. So many passengers will be traveling on crowded buses. We increase the variability of the cycle times of the buses. And so because there are some buses that bunch to others ahead of them, and some drivers are driving fast, these buses don't carry that many passengers. Those buses will have a cycle time that's very short, but not many passengers will experience that many seats that are not used, while other buses that are going to be delayed, that they are normally the ones that are ahead of the pack of buses that are running together, are going to be very crowded and are normally going to have long cycle times. And we will normally, this is going to reduce the transit demand because users are not going to experience a good quality of services. So if you experience low level of service, you will normally look for other alternatives to satisfy your trip needs. Here's a small example to show what's the difference between having regular services and irregular services. Let's say we have the same amount of buses. Here, the buses are coming every 5 minutes. If the buses are coming every 5 minutes and the amount of demand is roughly the same, so that same amount of passengers are arriving at this stop, so all buses are going to carry almost the same number of passengers. If we have bunching and you have some buses coming every 2 minutes and some other buses coming every 8 minutes, what you will see is that the buses that arrive after a long headway probably are going to find so many passengers waiting that they're going to carry a lot of passengers, while the others one are going to be roughly empty. So we're going to see crowded buses followed by empty buses, but our experience, and I experienced myself before starting working on this, is that when you go to a bus stop, you wait for a long time, and then you see a bus coming, you're going to board the first bus that arrives, and that bus is going to be crowded. You normally don't believe that there's a problem of bunching, and you're going to leave the first bus after you have waited for a long time to board the second bus. And probably you will have the same experience in elevators, in big buildings. It normally happens the same phenomena. And that's the picture that you can see in many cities. This is from Bogota. So what we want, increase the speed on the regular headways. And how can we do it? Is there a solution? Probably there's two issues. And one is one that Cesar was talking about. This is infrastructure. If we have better infrastructure, segregated lanes, what happens in metro systems or in good BRT systems is that normally buses will not get affected by congestions in the city. So they're going to have regular travel time between stops. But we still need to have regular dispatching from terminals. And we had seen and we had worked with data from Bogota, and there's a lot of problem on dispatching at terminals. Also, we will need to look for places where there are conflicts and some buses are being delayed on a regular basis. So it's good to look at the data and see where are the spots where the buses have very irregular travel time between bus stops, and probably have some priority measures so that the time between one stop and the next one is regular and it can be reliable. Once you solve those types, you will need to solve for the heterogeneity of drivers. And the way we have been working on this, and this is a long time project actually, just after I finished my PhD, I came to join the Catholic University. And here at Católica, we had been working on this research area. First, as a research question, how can we prevent buses from branching? And afterwards, since we had seen the important impact of having a real-time control on a regular basis, not only a few places along the route, and we can see big improvements on doing every following on real time along the route the buses. What we developed was a product that can use the optimization model that we have built and provide suggestions to drivers so if they are doing fine. So we can see here in the first screen, this is a tablet that is installed in the buses. This is a commercial hard tablet that you can install in any bus and provide information to the bus driver of how is he doing regarding to the bus ahead, the bus that is behind. So on top of doing it, advice of if he's doing fine, we normally provide them with the information on where is the bus ahead of him, where is the bus behind him in terms of distance, in terms of travel time. And if he's doing fine, we will say, please keep the same speed, we're doing fine. In other cases at the terminal, we say, wait at the headers until you need to leave, and probably we will give them the information on when is the right time for him to leave. If he's delayed, we will tell them that he's running late and how long, for how much. Here in the example, he's 42 seconds late. And in the other case, he's going ahead, and probably what we want him is that he goes slower, and we tell them you are going 42 seconds ahead of what you should do. And we do this on a real-time basis based on where are the buses currently now, what are the current travel times in the streets, and which is we do it with currently with the demand that's accounted in the previous month, but in the future we will be able to look at demand in real time of how the system is evolving and working that particular day. In simulation, we have shown, and in practice afterwards, we also have shown that the cycle time of the buses without control and with control can be reduced, and the variability can be reduced a lot. That was something that was really interesting and counterintuitive at the beginning, because we thought that by introducing regularity schemes in which you normally can hold vehicles and ask vehicles to go slower, but it's very hard for me to tell a driver to go faster because for traffic conditions, he cannot do that. We see in practice that on average, the cycle time of the buses can be decreased a little, but more importantly, the variability of travel time of buses is decreased by a lot. that means that the bus operator will need less buses or with the same amount of buses provide a better frequency for their service and more regular. So that was a very interesting result, because at the beginning we thought that it was a trade-off between having more regularity but less frequency, and in practice we see that we can increase in both terms. So for us, and this research would like to highlight that the BRT future should be written with double R. So it's not only to have rapid, but we need reliable transit, and that's even more important. After we have developed the tools, we thought that, well, everybody is going to be interested in doing that. And what we saw in practice, and this is a joke that I got, I don't know the actual owner of the cartoon. I'm using it here because I got it from on a chat. But I think this joke is really what I have seen after we have this technology ready to use, is that we show the technology, and we have had meetings with many transit operators, and they normally tell me that they are busy doing other things, that this is not urgent. They don't see the problem as we have seen it so far. But eventually, after knocking many doors, we found two interested operators that were willing to try the technology, and hopefully now we are expanding the operations and doing pilots in other operators here in Chile. And we started a pilot project in Lund in Sweden with Skanetrafiken, which is the transit operator on the south part of Sweden and Scandinavia, and in Santiago with Red Bus Urbano, which is a company owned by Transdev, the French operator. So what we have been doing here in Santiago, we first provided data of how the buses are doing on real time. So we have a linear synoptic of where the buses are in a particular line here, as you can see. And you can see it also on a map, and you can show it in a map how and where the buses are currently located. And if you pinch here, you can also see what is the driver seeing in his screen when he's driving. We have also a web platform here to help on dispatching, and at the dispatching point in some services we provide the driver where at that time of the day which would be the next buses to dispatch on which services and at what time. And for some other operation, we have a mobile app to do that, the same thing in a tablet. We installed these communication consoles in two services in Santiago, and we integrated to the current software that was operating in Lund in Sweden. We have this smart dispatching tool that on a real-time basis is adjusting the dispatching times of buses at the headers based on the current location of buses and the recent dispatches. So if we had been dispatching buses every 8 minutes, our operational plan says that we should do it every 8 minutes. Probably you will keep doing that unless you don't have enough buses at the terminals, and looking at the current traffic conditions and where the next buses arriving to the terminal are going to come, then you decide when to dispatch the next buses. And if you're going to have less buses than your operational plan requires, the idea here is how you rationalize the use of the resources so that you keep a regular interval of dispatches so that your operation is smoother along the route and your users experience less waiting and more regular and more reliable service. And probably here you will compare what was planned, what was dispatched, what was the GPS tells of how the buses are moving along the route. Another really important part of our work had been training. Since we developed all the theory and everything on the lab at the beginning. What we thought is that we have a technology that could be really implemented, not realizing the importance of explaining to dispatchers, to drivers, the importance of regularity. Because when you don't realize how relevant is in the user experience, increasing regularity, what you tend to have is that the operators stick to what is more convenient to them and not understanding what could be the impact at the end. So what we implemented is training methods to dispatch correctly, and we did some videos. So because the dispatchers here normally have a very short cycle time of working at the company. So many of them don't work for many years or for long periods of time. So what you normally do is to do the first part of the theoretical course as on videos, and those videos afterwards you do some practical applications, some simulation of what would be the operation before they start working on that. So what would be the impact of doing this? And here we are showing excess waiting time at dispatching header. So this is the place in which you have the less variabilities just after you dispatch buses. And after we start using the technology, we have seen improvements in dispatching at the terminal of 14% of excess waiting time. And excess waiting time is all the waiting time that's not accounted for the average frequency. It's all about variability it's explained by the variability between the two buses that are coming after other. So it's a very important amount and just at the terminal. And if you can reduce this by 14% at the terminal, that will increase the level of reduction along the route of the vehicles. The other implication that has been very relevant for us is the cost in annual fines for the company. Here in Chile, there's a regulation scheme that penalize operators for lack of regularity in the services that they operate, and they pay fines. So that we thought that since they were paying fines for lack of regularity, they would be more interested in implementing this type of technology. In practice, it had taken some time to do that, but on average, between 2017 and 2018, they have reduced the amount of fines by 26%, the company. And you can see that we have been increasing the reduction from 2017 to 2018, mainly by increasing the quality of the training courses for the dispatchers and drivers. So giving them more incentives, explaining better what's the benefit of doing this had a big impact in the amount of fines that the company is paying. So on average, this means around 29 million Chilean pesos per month. I skipped one. And in the Lund case, we've been working with Trafiken. This is a picture from Lund, and this is one of the buses from them. And here this is the screen that the driver see there. It was translated to Swedish, and you can see that he's doing fine. Where's the bus ahead? Where's the bus behind in this case? In terms of requirements, it's been a different environment for us to work because there are many cultural differences in implementing new technology. Sweden, they normally take longer to test before committing to do something like that. We have been integrating all the systems, and we are ready to start the pilot test next month. And the other thing is that we have introduced the new type of operation to account for punctuality in some routes that have low frequency services, and have real-time control only in shared segments of the route. So in conclusion, reliability is a key metric in the user experience. To achieve reliability, we need regularity. And to guarantee regularity, we need to support of an intelligent system that adapts dynamically to the operating conditions. Normally, if you wait until buses are right next to each other, it's too late to act. And most systems that you are monitoring how the buses evolve along the route, and you don't monitor automatically. So just looking at the screen, the work is too boring to be fully focused full day to start acting as soon as you start seeing that two buses are getting closer. So the best scheme to do that is to have something that do it automatically and provide support for the driver to know if he or she should go slower or faster if he can during the route. The other thing that is very important in our experience is the commitment of drivers and operators. There should be incentives for drivers and operators to provide a more regular service. And for doing that, you need to explain to them why is that important to have regularity, and also to have incentives and measure how the operation is doing. So the key performance indicators here are regularity, excess waiting times at different points along the route, and work on continuous improvement, because when you have data and you are looking at how the system is evolving, you can manage and act to improve level of service. And that's what I was looking forward to telling you all about, and hopefully many of you will be at Mobilize. And thank you, Cesar and Christina. And I think I have one question here in the Q&A. The question is, can this type of system be used to prevent bunching across multiple routes operating on one roadway? The answer is yes, and the question that normally need to be asked here is what you would like to have. Do you would like to have regularity along the different lines, or you would like to have regularity across lines in the same roadway? Actually, we have experience implementing this in mixed traffic here in Santiago. So we did at some point a pilot test in Bogota, in which part of the service was on mixed traffic.
Great, thank you so much, Ricardo. And if anyone has some additional questions, you can feel free to enter them in the Q&A here. One of the questions that was written prior to the webinar was, when you look at travel time variability, such as dispatching, congestion, signal priority, and driver behavior, which one would you say had the biggest impact on variability?
I would say dispatching and driver behavior are two issues that you need to work to get rid of bunching. But the others are also relevant. If you don't do anything in a route, you're going to have a bunching even with automated vehicles. If you have automated vehicles that all travel at the same speed, do dispatch it correctly, bunching will occur unless you do something along the route, because the dynamic of the system is such that buses will tend to get together along the route due to variability in demand.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. We have another question here from the chat box, and I would like you to also add it to the Q&A. But the question is, what about government actions to assure a stable commercial speed?
Well, I think safety should be paramount in these services. So probably you would like to restrict the maximum speed of buses, but as long as the buses are driven at a safety speed, they have always some leeway to go a little bit faster or slower. And particularly if you slow down a little bit, the buses that are getting ahead because they didn't catch so many passengers at some point, or because they didn't get any red light on traffic, if you delay them a little bit, then you ensure that all buses get the same amount of load and they have similar cycle time. Otherwise, you will have the problem. And that's what we have to see.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. We have another question here. You noted 3 factors that are important when it comes to making this successful. What would you say is the most challenging component, such as getting the correct predictive or proactive algorithm, getting driver and operator buy-in, or measuring the results of implementation?
I would say that getting the driver operator buy-in, it's one of the really challenging part, and getting the commitment of the transit operator, the company, that's because at the end, the driver should be rewarded if he's doing his job right, and I think that's a very important part.
Great, thank you. The next question here is, based on your research worldwide, what is the lowest sustainable headway that you have seen that successfully achieved to date with buses on dedicated lanes? And then secondly, in mixed traffic, what is theoretically possible with this technology you've described?
We haven't tested to see what would be the maximum amount of frequency or minimum headway achievable by this type of technology. But probably if headways of 1 minute or something like that, I think that's perfect. This technology will work very well with 1 or 2 minutes. Less than 1 minute probably is difficult, and I guess the way to work on those type of systems is to have pairs of buses running together. And I had seen that type of operation in Istanbul. They normally run it in the BRT corridors, and sometimes you see 2 or 3 buses running together like a train. And in mixed traffic, I think 2 minutes headway, the system will help a lot to avoid bunching. And probably we will not be able to avoid it always, but it's better than, it will be impossible to run it without some support. And then in practice, you see a lot of punching in system with 2 minute headways.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. The next question here is, what is your opinion about which is better, a penalization or a reward scheme for bus operators?
I think you need carrot and sticks both at the same time. I think, yeah, you need both. Actually, the system in Santiago, in that regard, I think it's interesting. And probably many of the viewers don't know it, but here in Santiago, the scheme is to have penalties, fines for lack of regularity, and there's a formula how it's computed. So they took 3 points along the route in which the variability is measured, and based on that variability have nonlinear function in which it's computed the amount of fines. But then they have a reward for the best company in terms of regularity, and the best company gets some of the fines of the other operators.
Oh, that's interesting for the Santiago case. Thank you for sharing. The next one here is, can you please talk about how to integrate this type of dynamic dispatching with driver working schedules?
Yeah, normally what you will need is to build schedules that allow you for that type of flexibility. So you know how many drivers and buses you have at the particular terminal, and based on that information, you do the dispatching. So when you think about what's your available resources at the terminal, you need to think about both. How many drivers are you going to have available at particular time of the day, and how many buses are going to be available?
Great. We have another question here. Have you seen success in the use of wait for the next bus signaling on buses for passengers to observe and act on? For example, this was tried in Vancouver, Canada in the past.
I have seen systems like that. I haven't seen so much reporting about how successful they are. I have seen it also in metro system, that they give you information of how crowded are the different wagons in the train, so that in the platform you choose the places in the train that they're going to be more comfortable to you. And in Hong Kong, I remember seeing a managed lane of passengers to board buses. So at some point, someone who's helping in the queue will allow the bus to leave at some point. We did some research few years ago on the idea of boarding limits as a strategy to avoid bunching, so that you will have a maximum amount of passengers that you are going to allow to board at particular stop. And we see that that strategy will pay off only if you have a really high frequency services. So probably if you're operating a service with less headway than 2 minutes, it might do you give help, because in those instances, you're going to ask the passenger to wait for the next bus, and the next bus is coming really soon.
Great, thank you. Well, if no other attendees have additional questions, we can move towards wrapping up this webinar. Please feel free to enter more as I speak. Oh, great, we have another one here. What kinds of operators, bus driver, incentives have been successful and well received by employees to adopt bus assist and to modify their behaviors?
Well, to have a bonus of the indicators on the line, and have some collective and individual rewards. So you could, so the bonus could be for one particular line. If you, as a line, increase your level of service on the indicators of waiting time for particular below certain threshold, probably in the case of Santiago, they might have a barbecue organized at the, and those type of incentives are really good, because this is a collective game. If only one or two drivers in the route do it right, you don't get the benefit. You need for many of them to work correctly. So since they have a collective incentive, then they have the social pressure of their peers to do it better.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. The next question here is applying this technique from bus to rail. So our attendee says, I observed bunching on one of the Washington, D.C. subway lines last January. Do your techniques for communicating with operators work with trains as well?
Yeah, and actually we've been trying to implement a pilot, not in metro system, but in trams, mixed technology, almost the same, because the problem is exactly the same. And you could also think on doing similar things on elevators yes. The problem of punching occurs in all metro lines. And normally what happens in metro line is, by the control system that they have, is that you hold trains in the tunnel before arriving to a station.
The next question here is, you had mentioned big monetary savings using an example, and they would like you to give a breakdown of those savings. I think the initial example you gave was less buses for the operator, but if you could give a larger description of what these savings could be or the savings that you've experienced.
No, here in Santiago, the main driver for savings are the reductions on fines. Most of the companies have not changed the amount of buses that they are operating. By contracts, they are obliged to have a certain amount of fleet size. What the impact of this type of system is to increase regularity, and probably what they are achieving on one side is to have less crowded buses. So most people will travel in less crowded buses, which is not something that is monetized as easily. But what I showed in the previous slide was when here is the reduction on fines. So how many fines were the company paying in 2015 and 2016, and how much were they paying in 2017 and 2018? And that was the reduction in fines. And this is in Chilean pesos. 1 Chilean pesos is roughly 800 or 700. 700 Chilean pesos is $1. So you need to divide by 700 to get the amount in US dollars.
The next question here is, do you know of any options other than technology to auto-regulate bus operators without regulation being done by the regulator itself?
Well, we used to have local inspectors, and you still see them in many Latin American cities. So when drivers get paid by how many passengers ride in their buses, in many cases there's a market, there's value for the driver to know how many minutes behind the previous bus he is. So he pays an inspector in the road that tells where how long had happened before or after the previous bus had passed by. And that is a self-regulating system that works with local information. There's no technology, it's a human working for that. But they have some problems, and the main problem that we used to see here in Santiago was a lot of competition for passengers. And in many cases, the buses will skip stops with few passengers to try to reach the stop in which most passengers concentrate to get the bigger reward. So you tend to see buses running very fast to reach those stations in which you will have a lot of passengers, and at the same time sometimes leaving some passengers without stopping.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. Another question here is, have you received any positive reactions to your work from staff at the APTA, the American Public Transportation Association, which is concerned with public transit service improvements in USA and Canada?
We haven't done, we were at the last APTA meeting in Atlanta. We showed this, and we have tried to do some pilot testing in the US, but it's very, very slow in terms of getting the technology. The tablets that we were using right now are imported from an Israeli manufacturer. So there were some problems in the type of tendering they have, because they have to have the technology that was going to be provided locally. We still can integrate this technology because it's based on Android systems. So if you have a tablet with Android, it will be easier to integrate, but we haven't had a trial in the US. We're waiting to have the chance to do that.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. And I think you bring up a good point, the difficulty in implementing a pilot, but at least with the ones in Lund, Sweden and Santiago, what do you think are the next steps? Are these pilots going to be scaled up? And if
Yeah,
so,
we're looking,
how to
yeah,
scale?
we would like to have more cities, more systems operating with this. In Chile, we are scaling up, and now we're doing pilots in many other cities. Hopefully, by the end of the year, the system is going to be employed in at least 5-6 cities and the biggest cities in Chile. One of the problems is installing the tablets in the buses. So in many cases, we have been going on the first step to do smart dispatching at terminals, and later on to have the tools on the buses when the buses are renewed. In the case of Sweden, it was easier to integrate because the buses were already equipped with all the tablets. So what we did was integrating in the system that they had already in place. And we look forward to other opportunities to test and pilot and learn more about how to do it in different settings.
That is great. Thank you so much, Ricardo. I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up this webinar, but before we close, I would like to bring people's attention to our next webinar. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen.
Sure.
Here we go. And I do see that we have another question for you, Ricardo. I can put you in touch with Ricardo regarding the bus operator in Mexico City who is interested in pilot. Yes. Great. So for our attendees today, as mentioned earlier, Ricardo is actually going to lead a workshop at MOBILIZE Fortaleza this June. It will be based on the same topic, bus rapid and reliable transit, BR squared. So I really encourage folks to look at our materials after the summit if you will not be attending. But overall, if you are interested in learning more about MOBILIZE and what we will be learning this year, next week on Wednesday, the city of Fortaleza will be giving a webinar on reclaiming the streets of Fortaleza, and it will review how they won the 2019 Sustainable Transport Award and what they expect to show during MOBILIZE next month. The webinar will present a broader context of the city, their sustainable transport projects, and how those projects resulted in safer and people-friendly streets, concluding with lessons learned and transferable policies for other cities. So if you are available, I highly encourage you to join us for this webinar, and we can see a preview of what MOBILIZE attendees will expect in the month to come. And again, Ricardo, I would just like to thank you for doing this webinar today. It was so useful to hear about outcomes from your TUMI workshop, but also what are some exciting things to come from this pilot. And as mentioned earlier, we're excited to see the infographic that will come from the workshop, and we'll be sharing that with attendees as well.
Thank you very much.
Again, yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and I hope to see everyone online again soon.